Hello, everyone. My name is Marie O'Neill, and I am an astrologer. Today's talk is on presentation skills for astrologers. The reason I decided to give this talk is because, like you, people, other astrologers and interested astrologers, people who are interested in astrology, you have attended astrology classes and talks, I'm sure, where sometimes the talk was vibrant and wonderful, and other times it wasn't. Why is that? This is what we will be talking about today. What gives me the expertise to actually talk about this particular subject? One, I am an astrologer, therefore I know the language of astrology. I have given talks and continue to give talks in the astrology community. I've spoken at NORWAC, at UWAC, NCGR conferences, at at the San Francisco Astrological Societies. I've given lots of talks in the community, and therefore I have also attended a lot of talks. The other thing that qualifies me as a speaker is, as someone to talk about this subject, is that I have been a member of Toastmasters for 13, I believe almost 14 years now. Toastmasters is a speaker organization that has chapters around the world teaching people how to give presentations, whether it's for business or for the person's personal life. The other credential that I hold is that of an actor, a stage actor and an on-camera actor. Albeit the on-camera part has been limited, I still have that particular experience. So I've had well over 20, maybe 30 years almost experience giving talks, whether professionally or on stage. And there are some key tools that I am bringing to you, the astrologer, tools that I believe will help you be a better presenter. Now, the structure of this class, of course, it's 1 hour, so we're not able to talk about everything. What I'd like to do is also have this be an interactive talk so that it's not just me giving talks or talking. I'd like to know what it is each of you need from this particular talk. Linda, is it possible to have the people who are on the call just in a couple of short sentences say what it is they want to get from this talk?
Yes, certainly. Give us a moment to, think about it. Okay, anyone ready to go?
No one wants to speak.
I think we are curious because I haven't seen a talk like this before. And I was just, wanting to learn. And
Okay.
it's all new to me. But how does everyone else feel? What were you expecting from Marie's talk today? Perhaps, Marie, a good one to start off with would be, what about shyness and nervousness and feeling not good enough, or feeling like, people who compare themselves to other astrologers, who feel perhaps they don't have a lot of technical knowledge or something like that.
That's a very good place to start. Typically what I tell people is everyone, regardless of our expertise, has something to say. The way there are a couple of key ways to work with the shyness. and the feeling not good enough. That is an energy that can be harnessed and used to energize your talk. The way to work with it, though, is to be prepared. Know your subject. Know what it is you want to say, what it is you want others to take away from the talk. That's the first thing. So you want to prepare, and then you want to practice. It's okay. And if you're shy and feel as though you have low self-esteem, practicing is another tool that can be used. And when you're practicing, you want to practice with people who, you want to have a couple of people in the room when you're practicing. One, you want someone in that room who knows something about the subject matter that you're talking about, so that they can critique the accuracy and the delivery of, and also the language that you're using. The other type of person that you want in the room is someone who knows absolutely nothing about the subject. Because if you're able to convey your points to someone who doesn't know anything about the subject and they get it, then you're good to go. When you are going into the room, or actually before you go into the room to give your talk, it's sometimes a good idea, actually always a good idea, to do simple things like going to the bathroom, to make sure that you don't have to do that. It's amazing what happens when we get nervous. A lot of times we have this urge to go, and maybe you really don't need to go, but you have an urge to go. So if you go ahead of time, that will take away some of the nervousness. The other thing is to be hydrated. It's important to be hydrated before you speak, because you're using a lot of energy to give a presentation, and your mouth can get dry and your tongue feels thick and it wants to stick to the top of your mouth. Sounds like a simple thing, but I'm telling you, when you're on that stage giving your talk, you want to make sure that you're hydrated and that you have water there. The other thing that you want to do is breathe. Breathing is simple, but not when you're giving a talk, because we forget to breathe. We forget to take deep breaths in before we start talking. It's amazing how you can calm your nerves by just breathing. One of the things that I do is I will actually exercise before giving a presentation. And when I say exercise, I don't necessarily mean, I'll go out for a walk, a brisk walk, because I want to get my energy up. I need to be pumped so that I can regulate the energy. It's much easier to start from the glass full of having lots of energy and toning it down, versus starting with low energy and having to lift yourself up. One of the other tools is, and I don't know how old the audience is, but I remember I wasn't around, I don't think I was around when this was done, but the it was two of the presidential candidates years ago, John F. Kennedy and Nixon here in America. I believe it was in the 60s, or maybe 1960 or 59, or I don't remember when it was. But the point is, Nixon refused to use makeup, and Kennedy, of course, used makeup on stage because he knew about stage, and he knew to have powder, he knew how to set the stage so that he would look good. One of the tools that speakers use is going to the room ahead of time before you're going to give your talk, taking a look around to see what your podium looks like. What are your surroundings? Where do you want to move in the room? What sit in the seats or a few of the seats in the room and look to the front of the room so that you can get a picture of what your audience will be seeing when they look at you. So you want to get to the room early. You want to make sure that you're using makeup, and as women, we do use makeup, but make sure, but what happens is we sweat. Women glow, but I say we sweat, and when we get nervous. So if we're powdered, that lessens the look of being nervous because it lessens the moisture that is coming through the skin. Going to the room helps you to feel comfortable in the environment. If you can get to that room, I like to go to a room a day before if I can. If I'm not able to, sometimes I will have the coordinator email me pictures of the room where I'm going to be speaking so that I can get a visual of what that room looks like. That also lessens your nervousness because some of the surprise factor is taken out of the presentation. As many surprises as you can demystify, or not demystify, as you can take away, the better you're going to be as when you get up to actually give a talk. The next thing that will help with nervousness is practicing in the room if you can. If you're not able to, that's fine. But these are some of the tools that you can use to take away some of the nervousness, but it will not take all of it away. What I find works best is to actually just do it. When you start talking, you're usually nervous, and it doesn't matter. Here's the other thing. It really doesn't matter what your experience level is as far as being nervous. You're going to be nervous. As a matter of fact, when I am working on a show and I'm getting ready to go on stage, if the nervousness isn't there, I know I'm going to make a mistake. This is because I need that nervousness to channel. I need to channel that nervousness into the performance. And make no mistake, a presentation is a performance. You're presenting to an audience your ideas, your key points, and you want to do a good job. So I hope that answers that particular question. Linda, what do you think? Do you have any?
Yes, fantastic. I can see that you're talking about a conference or something like that, like in the real world. But what about the area of like what we're doing, online meetings? I guess it's easier, right?
No.
Okay.
It's actually harder. The reason it's harder is because when you're on stage, you can use your body. You can use your whole body to convey a point. When you're on camera, you're using your face. You're using vocal variety, and I'll talk about vocal variety. And you're using vocal variety, eye contact, facial expressions. You're still using gestures, but they're not seen. With vocal variety, it's about raising your voice and lowering your voice and using different pitch and different intonations to make points. You're also having to use there's two thoughts that are going through my mind at the moment. The first one is when you're talking on camera, you don't see anybody. You have no audience in front of you. You have an audience in the computer or in their homes, wherever you are, but you're talking to this little dot on your camera. and the camera on your screen. That's what you're talking. That's who you're talking to, which means that when you're giving a presentation on camera, you need to have one person in mind, one person in front of you who you are actually giving that presentation to. It can be you, Linda, who I am talking to. It could be another astrologer. It could be anyone, but I'm not necessarily talking in my mind to the group. I'm talking to one person. The reason I'm doing that is because I want to make sure that the talk is personal. That and so when you're having a conversation with someone, with your best friend, you're talking to that one person, and therefore your gestures are different, your tone of voice is different, how you speak, everything about you is different when you're speaking to one person. So it doesn't matter really whether you're speaking to one person or the whole group, or whether there's a whole group in the room, but you want to make sure, especially when you're on camera, that you're speaking to one person. It reduces the chance of you losing your train of thought too. Does that make sense?
Oh, yes. And I was just thinking that you're in relationship then, rather than just speaking by yourself.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yes. That is a key. The other thing that you have to pay attention to when you are talking in this format is turning on your camera or your video, your camera early, at least if you can 3 or 4 minutes early or 5 minutes early, because you want to see what your audience is seeing when they look at you. What is the room? What is the view that they're getting in the room that you're in? Because you want everyone to pay attention to you and not to what is behind you. I mean, it's okay to I have a bookcase back there and a door, but I've made sure to limit what you actually see. Some people put artwork, maybe they put a rug or a screen up behind them so that is what is seen. But it's important, like I said, to pay attention to what is in the room. It's important to talk to one person. And it's important to make sure that your computer is high enough so that when you're talking to I shouldn't say high enough, raised up or lowered, so that when you're talking to the little dot, which is what I'm talking to now, that you're eye to eye, or you're not talking up or you're not talking down. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So, yeah. So those are just some of the things that you can do. And I do find it much more challenging to talk to a camera on my computer than I do in an audience, because I can draw the energy, use the energy of the audience in a room, where I'm not able to do that with the camera right in front of me. So the rules are a little different. I still use an eye contact. Oh my goodness, eye contact that's golden. When we are speaking on camera, sometimes we read, and that's fine. It's okay to have something that you need to read in front of you. When you're reading, there's a trick to reading. And that trick is you can read a sentence, but look up because you look up to the camera as if you can, hopefully you can, so that you're staying connected with the person who is listening to you and actually seeing you. You don't want to have your head constantly down, which occasionally I've actually done, and that's not a good thing. So there's a balance. What I like to do, because of this particular technique, I like to use my finger to keep track of where I am on the page. So when I'm speaking, I will put my finger at the beginning of a sentence and look down, read part of the sentence, but my finger is constantly moving from the first sentence to the second sentence so that it makes it easier for me to find my place again. Because you can be looking at the camera for a while, and then it's, uh-oh, where am I? And you've got to now spend time looking at where you are, or figuring out where you are on the screen, on the page. So that's important with video. The other thing, as you know, Linda, is making sure that your equipment is up to date and that the voice can be heard. You want to make sure that if you have any visual aids, that they're good. And here's a trick with visual aids, and it's something that I see frequently, whether a person is speaking to a camera or whether they're speaking in a conference room. People use too much information on slides, too many words. It's much better to convey a point with a picture or with 1 or 2 sentences, no more than 3 sentences on a page. I don't need to read bullet points, because if I'm going to spend the time reading your bullet points on your PowerPoint presentation, I'm not listening to what you're saying. So I'd much rather have a picture and a few bullet points rather than a whole page of bullet points. So on camera, you want to make sure you are varying your voice and your pitch. You want to make sure you have eye contact. And facial expressions are very important for conveying points. When you are speaking to a live audience, your facial expressions can be bigger because your audience is not right in front of you. When you're speaking on camera, you don't have to do a whole lot to convey points with your face. But facial expressions are how many of you have watched soap operas or watched TV shows? When you actually, if you ever get the opportunity to sit in on a taping of a show, do so, because it's as though the actors are barely moving when they're on camera. However, their face is telling the story. Like I'm telling the story. I can be upbeat and happy, or I can be down, but your face needs to match what it is you are trying to convey. Does that make sense?
Oh, yes. It's so much
Yeah.
easier to talk when you don't have your video on.
Yes, it is easier to talk. The other thing with video are glasses. I had my glasses on because I wear glasses. When I looked at the screen, there was a reflection coming through. That's not a good thing when you're going to be on camera. We don't worry about that so much when we're in a room full of people. There is no glare, really. I mean, none that is distracting. But when you are looking at the screen here, like I am now, well, there might not be a glare right now. Maybe the sun has moved, but there's typically a glare, and you want to, position your camera so that there is no glare. So, when you are, what questions are there so far? Maybe I should ask that. No one has any questions?
Well, I do, but
I could ask a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Wendy.
Oh, sorry, I was in the store, so I missed the last part that you were talking about. But one thing I was thinking when you first started, sorry, I'm in my car pulling up. I'm just going to stop right now.
That's all right.
Okay, so I've been invited to do this monthly podcast, and the ladies that I'm doing it with don't know anything about astrology, So it's like, even if I use any astrological term, they freak out. They're like, what? It's like super intense.
Yes. Yes.
And I mean, it's kind of intense for me in that way. So they want me to do this new moon thing. They're calling it.
You went out, Wendy. I'm not able to hear you.
Correct now. How about now?
Okay, now I can hear you.
Yeah, sorry. My Bluetooth looks for my internet when I get home or something. So what I said was, they want me to do this new moon segment called New Moon with Wendy Grooms, except we're not really getting even to the new moon. It's just this educational piece. And so then I was feeling like, oh my God, people that have some astrology understanding are going to go, well, this is not a new moon thing. So I have to work that out with them, like if we're going to change what it's called or whatever. But it's been an interesting dynamic getting used to recording and being with. If I had another astrologer there, I think it would be a little bit easier. So this is a big stretch for me. It's a big stretch.
And it's a good stretch because remember, Wendy, really? Well, think about it. You have, I don't know if you see clients,
Yeah,
who come to
I mean, I have some astrology clients, yeah.
Well, when you're talking to those clients, you have to speak in layman's terms because they typically don't understand. And when I talk about the moon, I'll, of course, mention the moon. I'll say moon. However, I will mostly talk about the person's emotions.
Right.
And I typically don't say aspects because really all aspects are about integration. So when I'm speaking of aspects, I'll say, you have this emotional, you might have this fear that the person is working on. And you can say, I can see where this is going to be a challenging issue because you're looking at a square or an opposition, or square, say, or you can say with an opposition, I can see where this is a tug of war, or you can use warlike terms, but using layman's terms is a big deal for everyone. But yeah, getting the practice with a podcast, oh my goodness, this is good because you can have your own podcast.
Yeah, I mean, one thing is it definitely is stretching me in a good way. And yesterday we recorded the new moon for late September because this one woman's going to be out of the country. And we did one last week and the week before. And I was like, okay, this is too much because I didn't feel prepared and I didn't really have time to prepare yesterday. And then I felt like really uncomfortable. But it's okay. It's like, such a learning process. So I'm appreciating your talk. And I love what you said about integration versus aspects because, that's a great word. So did you learn all that from your astrology study or just in your own practice of applying it?
I learned that through Stephen Forrest.
Oh.
And Stephen is 100% in the corner of not using the terms aspects. And and when you're looking at a planet or a sign, you're looking at energy. when you're describing that planet or that sign, you don't have to say, you want to tell a person, you have Mars square, maybe square Mercury, but you don't necessarily have to say that. You can talk about the fire. You can talk about, you might speak in a forceful way, or you might anger people, or you might come across as being angered or pushy or whatever. But you're using layman's language because people know nothing about Mars. They know everything, or they think they know everything about Mercury, but you get the
That is hilarious.
get the point. It's true. It's true. And when you're doing these podcasts, you want to pay attention to how long these podcasts are and when people trail off, or what is an optimal amount of time to have a podcast.
Right. Well, the nice thing is when they feel like if I'm going in a direction where they're glossing over, she'll like interject a question and then, slows it down, and then we can break it down. So yeah, we're all learning.
Good.
So,
this will make
thank you so much.
You're welcome. This will make you a better astrologer.
Yeah, I can feel that. I'm like, wow, this is taking me out of my comfort zone, which is important, because how else am I gonna, put it out there without these skills?
Absolutely. And I tell you, I've been to astrologers when I first started studying astrology. Of course, none of us really know anything. And I've had some astrology readings from well-known astrologers, or I've left not knowing anything because they've used the language of the industry. And I didn't understand the language of the industry.
Yeah, I actually have had that experience too, early on.
Yeah. So so the language that you use is so important. And I tell you, whenever I am going to give a talk, I usually practice on my Toastmasters. And I mentioned what Toastmasters is. I'm a member of an advanced group here in Santa Rosa, where we're able to give hour-long presentations. So the talks that I give at NORWAC, at UWAC, at any of the astrological conferences, I run it by the group first. Why? Because they know absolutely nothing about astrology. And if I have lost them with my talk, or I've lost them and they don't understand, they're going to tell me. They're going to tell me specifically what it is they don't understand. And it's up to me to say, well, I know you're not an astrologer. I'm going to leave this in, because depending on the audience that I'm going to be speaking with at the conferences or the speaking organizations, or I'll change it. For example, none of the people that I talk to know the difference between esoteric astrology, evolutionary astrology, and traditional astrology. They don't know any of that. They just know astrology, the word astrology. So anyway, our language is key. That's the first rule. And here's another thing. Enunciation. The way we pronounce words is so important. We must enunciate so that people actually hear, they actually understand what we're saying. The diction, our diction is important. Making sure that if you're in a room with people, that you're speaking not from your chest, but from your diaphragm, so that, and this is good on camera too. So for me, I'm sitting here, but I'm not slouched, because when I'm slouched, it comes across on the camera that I'm slouched. You might not see me being slouched, but the way I present myself is different, versus if I'm holding my chest out and my neck, my shoulders back, and I'm coming across more confident. This will also help you with shyness too, and with feeling confident. What do they say? Fake it till you make it. Well, you don't have to fake it so much. You just have to use a few tools to help you present better. And Wendy, I'm so proud of you doing this. This is good. So next question, please.
Great. I have two questions. The first one is, what drives me really crazy is when a speaker is speaking too fast, and they will speak this way for a whole hour or more, and it is so difficult to really absorb what they're saying. So could you speak on that, please?
I certainly can, because I've been in rooms where that has occurred, and also on camera. Sometimes speakers are speaking fast because they're nervous. Sometimes their rate of speech, which we all have a rate of speech, that is determined by, you take 1 minute, 60 seconds, and you read a passage. Then you divide the number of words, you count the words in that passage, and you divide that by 60, and that will give you your rate of speech. If you are speaking, if you're speaking too fast, one of the ways to slow that down is to enunciate your words. Enunciation is powerful with slowing the rate. But usually people have to speed up their rate, not slow it down. But I do find that enunciation helps, using vocal variety helps, using body language doesn't help with that one, or nor does facial expressions. It's all about the rate that you speak, and you have to be conscious of the rate that you're speaking, the rate that you're using for your talk. If you are paying attention, here's the other thing. Being a good speaker also means being a good listener. If you are listening to the body language, if you're on a camera, of course, there is no body language, but you can intuit whether someone is paying attention to what you're saying or not, even if you're talking to the camera. But if you're a good listener, then you're talking, but you're listening to the other person's body language, their facial expressions. You're listening to see or to determine whether or not they're understanding you. If you are listening, because listening is key here also with your rate of speech, to slow it down, you will intuitively know that you need to slow your rate of speech. That is, if you're paying attention. And if you're not talking to hear yourself talk, which some people do. And some people just get excited, and it's okay to vary your cadence, to vary your rate, to speed it up and to slow it down, because you don't want to speak in a monotone voice. But you also, if you're getting, one of the things that I like to do is get feedback from my audience when I finish a talk, especially if I'm giving a talk in person. I'll have a sheet that I hand out to people. And if they're telling, and usually people have never told me that I've spoken too fast. If anything, they tell me to speed it up, because I enunciate, and therefore my rate of speech is not as fast as other speakers. But paying attention to what you're saying and how you're saying it, you have to be conscious of it. There is no other way around that. You must be conscious of it, and conscious of your audience and listening to them. You can tell if you're putting your audience to sleep, and you can tell if they're really into what you're saying. They're leaning forward and listening in anticipation of what it is you're saying or what it is you're going to be saying. So you have to pay attention to what it is your audience is telling you, either verbally or through the way they're responding to what it is you're saying. So yeah, there's that. Did you have another question, Linda?
Yes, this is a completely different area. It's about the content of a talk. What I find a bit troubling these days is it's all been done before. And we've all learned from other astrologers, and, you know, we're listening to podcasts and watching videos and reading articles, and it's like, oh, ho-hum, you know, like I've read all this before. So how can we present or create something new in the area of astrology? Something more interesting, you know, it's like, oh gosh. It's a difficult question.
No, it's a very good question.
Okay.
And one of the things that I like to do, I mean, when I'm going to give a talk, a lot of times I'll do a lot of research, and then I don't look at that research when I'm writing a paper, because I want to use my thoughts, my way of speaking. I also want to, what I like to do, when I'm putting a PowerPoint presentation together, I don't do that myself. And one of the reasons is because I'm an astrologer and I'm speaking on astrology. I have someone who is not an astrologer put my PowerPoints together so that they are more creative. She'll come up with slides that just blow me away, whereas I would probably use the more ho-hum slides, but we really don't want to use ho-hum slides. So when you have an idea, for example, I have an idea of an area that I want to talk about that has been talked about 1,000 times. I have my own slant on that particular planet, and therefore I want to give my particular viewpoint on it. So when you're writing a talk, write it as though you are the expert. It's okay to do research. It's okay to see what other people are doing. You don't want to, and as a matter of fact, Linda, this is perfect. It's a perfect question, because at NORWAC this year, there was some feedback. Laura always gets feedback from the participants for the conferences. And one lady gave feedback on basically all of the talks that she went to. Her general feedback was they're using the same presentation style. We come up with, say, a chart configuration, or maybe we want to talk about Mars. And so we come up with examples of dead people or other famous people. We put the talk together, and we put a PowerPoint together, and we present that information. And what she would like to see, and I like doing this too, is making your talks more interactive. If you I find that bringing in the audience to audience participation is key, because everybody wants to know about them, about themselves. So if you're talking about Mars, which everybody knows everything about, if you're bringing in the audience to, say, ask a specific question, well, where's your Mars in your chart? Or you can talk about that signature. That's one way, because if it's just the person lecturing, it's going to be boring anyway, I think, unless it's really new material and everyone in the room is really just biting at the chomps to get that information. So I find audience participation is key. I find not using the research, I mean, not using the research in my presentations, the research that I've come up with, I'm saying not using the research, but not presenting it in the way that I gathered it, which so many people do. Developing your own style is important. I mean, I've gone to, of course, some boring lectures, and I've gone to some exuberant lectures. And it all boiled down to whether or not the person used their own style. The other thing is everyone learns in a different way. So you might have people who are visual or auditory. You might have people who like both. So having some interaction, having different ways of presenting that material helps. I went to a class once where the person used scarves, the different colors of scarves, and each of us whose ruling planet was Mars stood by the red, the red scarf, and you get the picture there. But varying the way you present is, the information that you present is key for that, I think. The other thing that I find people do, which is boring, I shouldn't say boring, it's not boring, it is irritating. That is using uhs, ums, ahs, and long pauses, using filler words. That doesn't help at all. There's no need for a filler word. If you were lost for the next sentence or what to say, stop. Don't feel the need to fill in that space with a word, because that takes away from the presentation. Your presentation should be clean, crisp. No ums, uhs. That's one of the things that we talk about in Toastmasters all the time. But anyway, that was a diversion to your question, Linda, about boring talks. And I believe that we're going to continue to have some more boring talks, until people decide that they want to branch out and get away from the formulas, taking a risk, because it's a risk to put yourself out there in your way. One of the other points is, in rooms, I've seen astrologers talking to the board or talking to their PowerPoint. That is something that we should not do. If you want to look at your number one, your PowerPoint should be on your screen, on your computer screen, so that you can look at that. But if you feel the need to turn around and look at your screen, and then the big screen, do it, but don't say anything when you're looking. Turn back around to the audience when you need to actually speak. That is important. So, Linda, did that answer your question?
Oh, yes. And I've made a whole bunch of notes. They're fantastic. Thank you. That does bring up another question, though. What about honesty? Like, I believe in, I follow the philosophy of natural laws of just being yourself. What about being yourself versus a very polished presentation where you feel you're being a little bit dishonest?
You can have a polished presentation and still be honest. Having a polished presentation means that you know your material, you've practiced your material, you are enunciating your words, you're doing some basics here. You're not being prim and proper. That's not the point. You want to be yourself. I'm being myself, but I've still learned how to enunciate words. I've still learned how to use vocal variety and pitch. That is all a part of it. In addition to that, we are giving a performance when we are teaching. Now that you're being authentic, you've got to be authentic, because that comes across, when you're not being authentic, it comes across really quick to the audience. You can be authentic and still have a good talk.
Wonderful. And I did add here, add zest to your slides. Because, you know, there are tons of pictures out there, and there's, you know, you can be creative with the slides, can't you? And
you can.
yeah.
You really can. And I've seen slides that were really good. And one of the formulas is they had, you know, in school we have mascots. So on the slides, they would have I would call it a mascot, but it would be a fictional character who would be talking. I mean, maybe they would be on the screen and maybe pointing to the left or pointing to the right, so that you are told which direction to look. And I've seen different ways that people bring zest and interest to slides. Using color helps too. I like color continuity though, and I use the colors of my website on my slides as a backdrop, so that is my signature. When someone sees a slide with that color, they know, oh, this is Marie's presentation. It's my signature. And you can develop your signature for your slides and just use that over and over again until you get tired of it and want to use something else. But it's pretty easy to do. But with slides, a picture tells a story so much better. Oh, and here's one other thing that I didn't mention. Storytelling. As astrologers, it's good to have a story. I mean, we use other people's astrology charts in our presentations. That's fine to do. Whatever the point is that you're trying to make by using that particular chart, tell it in a story so that the audience will remember it. If you're looking at whatever the configuration is, I've used Aretha Franklin's chart and others' charts, and I like to use a story to convey the point that I am attempting to make. So, yeah. Next question.
This is just a basic question. Very often in our meetings, the speaker will ask for questions from the audience, and we just have silence, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yet we might have 10, 20 people in the meeting. And so how can we encourage our audience to ask questions and to interact with us?
There's a couple of ways to do that. And one of the ways, if you weren't asking me questions, Linda, what I would do is look at the list of speakers and call on, not speakers, but look at the list of participants and call on one of the participants and ask them a question. That's a good way to get participation.
Yes.
That's actually the best way to do it.
Yes, go ahead, Wendy.
Wendy, you have a question?
Oh, I thought somebody was speaking.
I think Wendy put herself on mute.
Oh, okay.
I see her. Yeah, I see her on mute.
Okay, we have about 4 minutes left. So would you like to share some final thoughts on this topic?
Yes, I'd be happy to. With speaking, the whole point is, well, what I like to do is have fun. I'm having as much fun as the participants. I hope the participants are having fun. So when I'm And when I'm giving a talk, I'm going in, yes, as the expert, but I also learn from the participants. So I prepare, always prepare my talks. I have done my homework, practiced, know my subject, and then I let it go. I relax. And I know, because I believe in divinity, in the Divine Mother, who I pray to, I know that what I say in a talk or presentation is what needs to be heard. Because before I give any presentation, I ask the mother to work with me and to speak through me and to have me say what needs to be said. Therefore, when I finish a talk and I haven't mentioned something, I don't beat myself up. I know, well, obviously that didn't need to be conveyed today, that particular point, because I didn't mention it. The audience didn't need to hear that. So be relaxed. Yes, be professional, be on point, know your material, but also be relaxed. And remember, the audience does not want you to fail. The audience wants you to succeed. They want to see you do a good job. So be kind to yourself. If you don't make a point, don't worry about it. If you think you flubbed something, don't worry about it. It's all good. Don't sweat it. Got it?
Wow, absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much. Would
Oh,
you,
you are welcome.
looking forward to more from you in the future. And
Thank you.
would you all please thank Marie O'Neill, everybody?
Thank you. My takeaway is I think I have a lot of the skills that you're speaking about, but finding stories and seeking out really good examples rather than just sticking to theory, because that would be my downfall, and also bringing in props like the colored scarves. These are the really important points for me to take away. I don't know if I would ever really do a presentation, but in my mind, I'm interested in entertaining the idea of teaching a course to young people, say 12 to 16, 17, that age group. So, because I think it's really an important age group for seeking internally about who they are, but actually giving them some real concrete tools to use in their life to figure out what's going on and how to help themselves move forward with, with their lives in a more focused and authentic way.
Oh, that's fantastic. And you can use, you can gather stories for kids, survey the kids, send them a survey to see what stories they're reading, what books they're reading, what they're interested in, and use those stories.
That makes sense. And also, just popular things from their age group, TV shows that they might watch, music that they may listen to, things like that, which will be a stretch for me, but it will be fun.
But the thing is, you want to meet the kids and anybody where they are, at the level of where they are. And that may not be where you are, but it's where they are, so that's where you go.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
It sounds like it could be really fun.
It can be fun. It's amazing.
So, yeah, I feel inspired now to actually kind of put some of this into action after your talk, because I've got a framework on, the visuals and just the whole presentation, and I think it's very applicable. So.
Oh, that's good. Are you going to use a focus group of kids so that you can have like a test run?
Well, I don't know. I thought I might just work on the actual different lessons, if you like,
Yeah.
and and then offer it at, you know, the community level through the community center, and just
That's
see
good.
who comes, you know, and from there, you know, we could end up having kind of a group that meets outside the community center to further our interests.
Oh, that'll be good. And then look at, this is just off the top of my head, the age group. Look at where their Pluto is and where, because, you know, we're dealing with generational, you know, so you look at how they learn. Look at their Pluto, of course, and, you know, their Neptune, what generation they're in with that. And yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good tip.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Okay, so that brings us to the end of your meeting. Thank you to our audience for your questions. And thank you so much, Marie O'Neill. We look forward to seeing you again.
Oh, yes. I look forward to being here, and thank you for having me come and give this particular talk. Okay.
Okay, thank you so much. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.